And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. It's great to have the one and only Professor Norman Fenton with us, giving his thoughts on the week's news. Norman, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, it's always good to come and speak to you, Peter.
Always is good. And of course, sometimes I have guests on and I think, oh, where's their book? Norman's book is down, just kind of under my computer, fighting Goliath. And it's, we'll show you. There it is on the back, just in case we've gone triple. So it's a fantastic book going through the timeline of what happened, fighting Goliath. Professor Norman Fenton and Professor Martin Neal, well worth a read if you're looking for something to remind yourself of the nightmare and the chaos that we are in, the COVID tyranny. It is an excellent book, but and of course, there is Professor Norman's handle. Make sure and jump in on that. And for Hearts of Oak, just thank you so much for your support for our viewers and listeners. You can click on that donor box or give Send Go. We appreciate all the £5 a month, £10 a month, all those small gifts. We really do appreciate it. But let's go with the first story. And the first story is looking at what's been happening in Israel, with the hostages being slowly released. Let me just bring it up. This is the first story. There you go. Sorry, slightly behind there. And these are individuals, a reminder that they were taken alive and brutally murdered by Hamas in captivity. Here are their photos. And it's to remind us that we had the peace deal, which was wonderful because you had the fighting had finished. Israel's PR battle, I think, had run out. But all the hostages were not released. Norman, let us know your thoughts on this. And as a Jewish individual, how do you see this failure of Hamas not to return the bodies, which is a real huge thorn in the side to everyone living in Israel?
It is because the Israelis value, of course, the return of the dead bodies almost as much as the live hostages. And it's worth mentioning that not only did Hamas break the ceasefire by not releasing all of the dead bodies immediately with those remaining 20 live hostages, but they also had been killing Israeli soldiers. They've actually killed 3 Israeli soldiers since the supposed ceasefire, which was why, incidentally, Israel retaliated with a number of very, very targeted strikes against some of the Hamas commanders. But what's also terrible is the fact that there was a filmed evidence, quite astonishing evidence, of Hamas, inclusion with the Red Cross, incidentally, burying, unbeknown that they were being watched by a drone, burying part of a body of one of the hostages, and then bringing in the Red Cross to show, oh, look, we'll uncover it. We found they took it out of a tunnel, buried it, covered it up, and then brought in the Red Cross to say, oh, look, we've just found another body. I mean, this is sort of shenanigans that they're playing. And of course, others have been where they've delivered bodies of Palestinians rather than, the wrong body. People they claim to have been a hostage wasn't. And there's also been instances of them releasing parts of a body of someone who'd already been returned. So you've got all that. But what's interesting about that particular tweet is that it shows the 2 of the hostages, Amaran Cooper and Shachar Baruch. They were both obviously they were captured alive, but Hamas themselves filmed them in captivity, still looking healthy and alive, as you can see. And they ended up, of course, murdering them. They weren't, people say, they died in captivity. No, they were murdered, along with many of the others. There was the famous case about a year ago when 6 hostages, including the American Hirsch Goldberg Poland, were actually shot point blank in the head because there was Hamas felt there was an imminent Israeli rescue about to take place. So, this is what we've got. And the final example is the Bibas children, the mother and the children. The children, when they returned those dead bodies, they were discovered to have been strangled to death in captivity.
because I didn't know the numbers, and I thought I'd just double check that actually there were 251 uh, individuals who were captured. 1,200 were murdered, 251 captures, and to think that actually Hamas killed quite a number of those while they were holding them, the world doesn't seem to be outraged, and maybe that message has not come across.
Well, part of the reason is that we know the Israeli PR is quite bad. I mean, but it's interesting that the Israelis, for example, could have released images of the hostages who had been murdered and with clear evidence of murder, the shots in the back of the head, but they don't. Unlike Hamas, who put out sort of fake pictures of sort of babies dying or starvation, the Israelis who have the real evidence are reluctant to do it because they feel it would be offensive to the families, which I completely understand. Instead, it's the same reason why almost very, very little of the most horrific evidence, video evidence from the October 7th attack itself, has never been released to the public. It's only some people have been shown this privately on visits to Israel, but even they haven't been shown the full evidence that is actually out there.
It's a horrendous situation, and when obviously you cannot deal with Hamas, but Israel are forced to do that because of this situation. So, but I've seen a lot of the individuals on X do a much better job than Israel on the PR. And I am very happy to Israel's PR. I don't need $7,000. I could do it a Halloween special. I could do it for 5,000, whatever. But it seemed to be citizen journalists that are actually putting out the message, and we'll touch on Tommy in a bit. But it is those individuals on X that are putting out the message that Israel as a state, seem to fail to do.
Yeah, they've always failed to do this. I think that the invitation that some of the government ministers gave to Tommy Robinson to come to Israel was actually an important development, because they've never done anything like that before. So maybe they realise that that's something that they need to do. But you're right; it's only individuals who, of course, the idiots claim are getting $7,000 for each post or whatever, who are actually putting the message out there. I mean, to be fair, if you're in the Israeli government, you've got like wars on 7 fronts, right? You've got all that to deal with. So they don't particularly care, I guess. They think that the PR is very low down on their list of priorities when, they've got sort of murderous jihadists basically surrounding them. So I can sort of understand it, but I really think they need to do something about it nevertheless.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's play a clip that was on your feed showing what Jews face, what Israel citizens face in the UK, in London. You look at this and you think this might be somewhere in the Middle East, but no, it's London, being led by a King's College London student. Here's the very short clip. So I remember being outside the High Court. It was after Naomi Wolf and Mark Stein's case, but I remember just going to the High Court like the next or day after, and there was a similar group, very aggressive, and of course, as I feel annoyed when I see that, thinking this is happening where I live, London, but then I'm not Jewish. And if you're Jewish, it must be a particular concern and a particular threat to you. But how have you kind of perceived these non-stop rallies, demonstrations, but these threatening mobs really that appear all over?
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, being a Jew in London, and everywhere you go, every weekend, if you go on the train, even if you're not going near these demonstrations, which take over large parts of London, you see on the trains, people with their, sort of death to Israel badges and their stupid kafirs, their tea towels on their heads, and we're not talking about just kind of like, lots of these are not just Muslims, but these are sort of white middle class idiots, basically useful idiots. But the really, really, the really violent ones there, who tend to be, if you look at that scene there, it tends to be mainly from the sort of Pakistani Bangladeshi communities, in this case in London. They get pretty violent. And of course, I went to a couple of the counter demos, and the hatred and the violence against us is quite horrific when you go into that. But I say, even if you're not anywhere near these demos, everywhere in London you see this, you get this feeling of this hostility wherever you go. It's quite frightening. But the fact that's interesting, that's at King's College there. It just so happens that a research colleague of mine, and I'm saying this publicly because he's made it public, Scott McLachlan, was recently fired from King's College. He was a lecturer there in the Department of Nursing and Information Technology. And it's interesting that it's not the reason why he got fired, but his stories about his experience there are quite interesting, because he tried to help a Jewish student in his department who was really, really overwhelmed by this horrible anti-Semitism they were facing. And he didn't get any support for doing that. On the contrary, when he questioned the fact that one of the a member of the research staff had sent an email to the entire university, all of the staff at the university, saying they needed to support, the Palestinian resistance, blah blah blah, and he made a complaint about that. He was the one who came under severe pressure from HR to apologize. They considered him to be the person in the wrong, rather than the person who sent this horrific message to the rest of the staff. So that's the kind of environment that we're talking about there. So it's not surprising they allow that kind of activity outside King's. I mean, the universities have been completely captured by this red-green alliance, and it's that red-green, the Islamic Socialist Alliance, which you're also seeing everywhere on the streets.
Yeah, we are, which is whipped up and pushed forward by the Mayor of London, and the fear is
it's definitely not organic. I mean, there's now lots of evidence coming out, for example, about the role of the Islamic Republic of Iran in funding and organizing these protests right from the beginning, even preparing them before October the 7th. All of these so-called Palestinian resistance movements, many of which are based in London, and yeah.
And the same thing will be coming to New York. But anyway, their election coming up very, very soon. I mean, that's a whole. Do look at Professor Norman's feed, and he puts up a number of videos showing what's happening, and nothing tells a story better than a 18-second video, as if you're there in the midst of it and you can feel the aggression. So it gives you an idea what it is like to live as a Jew in London, which is not.
You wonder what it is, if given that there's now this ceasefire, what exactly is it that they're demanding? Well, they're demanding the complete destruction of the Jewish state, and that's the only thing. That is the only thing that will make these people happy. And after that, of course, they'll come for the Islamization of the UK. You can bet on that if they succeed in destroying Israel.
Exactly, and let's see how the gays for Gaza actually survive when that happens. But that's a whole other. And I wanted to. There was another few clips you put up about what is happening in Sudan. Here's just a short clip, and then I think I had one headline from it. But here's a clip of, and the figures are 2,000 people have been murdered just over days. Here's a clip of it.
محرقة مورال اللي بيتكلم عنها، إذا تتكلم عن محرقة دي المحرقة أمرك كان تقدر أيوة فلنقاي مورال تين حرقناهم والله صباح والله حرقناهم فتك والله الحمد لله والشكر لله انحرقوا والله انشوا مشاوي.
And I wanted to bring up a picture as well, which was the front page. I don't know if we had talked to you about this one, but it just gives some of the figures that are happening. And it's this here: this is like, wow, maternity hospital massacre, these 460 dead. Fresh horror in Sudan as patients and staff were butchered after 2,000 civilians were executed in 2 days. And on this is 2 days later, 6 health workers, 4 doctors, a nurse, and a pharmacist were abducted, and more than 460 patients and their companions were reportedly shot and killed in the hospital. And there's another clip of a group shouting Allah Akbar, as the bodies lie around them. Of course, Sudan is over 90% Muslim. It seems to be that ethnic cleansing, but it's brutal, it's horrific, and yet there hasn't really been a lot written. It's not front page on the news. What were your thoughts when you saw some of it?
Well, look, I mean that article there. That's not been. I mean, where was that published? You're not seeing this in the mainstream news. I mean, it might be sort of mentioned, but you're not seeing anything like the outrage, the fake outrage over. So, I mean, there's a hospital attack, and there's real video evidence of that, and there's real video evidence of murders, right? Yet, when there were all those ridiculous false claims about Israel attacking hospitals in Gaza, when they were simply targeting, very, very again, directly targeting Hamas parts of the grounds of hospital, and there was of course no actual. Everybody believed massacres had taken place, but there was no actual evidence, right? You couldn't find any evidence of Israel directly targeting and killing doctors and nurses in hospitals or anything like that. And yet, massive outrage. All the, again, this is what was prompting a lot of these ridiculous demonstrations. And yet, here you have, in a few days in Sudan, real video evidence of genocide, as you say, of starvation, massacres, targeting hospitals, etc. And the video evidence is there. In the 2 years where they were claiming this was happening in Gaza, there was no. The only evidence was these fabricated Photoshop stuff, or they were using images from other conflicts, right? But here you've got the real evidence, and there seems to be no outrage whatsoever, because it's the no Jews, no news situation. I mean, it's horrific what's happening in Sudan, and it's, of course, it's similar to what the Islamists did on October 7th in Israel, a massacre, and you've got all the evidence of it. People just don't seem to be worried about it unless somehow the Jews can be cast as the victimizers. So and what's interesting, incidentally, that there's another, that you should look at another. You might have seen another that's pretty bad. There's lots of videos where you can see that they're killing women and children and hanging them as well. But I found one of the most interesting ones. You can look this up. You can find it. Is where they've captured a number of appear to be Muslim men, and they asked them to cite some verses from the Quran to prove that they're Muslims, at which point they appear to release them. They said, okay, you can go. And you see them walking off, and they then simply shoot every one of them from behind.
It's it is so we've seen that in Gaza as well, where Hamas just murder people in the street because supposedly collaboration. That's not how you deal. Whereas the humanitarian justice that you would normally expect in a normal country, and yet we have people in the West clamoring for that type of society.
I know, it's incredible. But the thing I just don't understand is that there's a sort of a lust. Over the last 2 years with Gaza, there's this obsession with the mainstream media to try and find these images of the supposed genocide and starvation in Gaza. They're desperate, and even as I say, they put up these fake photos, or photos of a starving child who's actually got some congenital disease, which is a famous example. They never can come up with the actual real examples, but they're thirsting for these examples. They want the evidence. They want the video evidence. They're trying to construct it even when it's not there. Here they've got the video evidence, and yet they don't show it on the mainstream news. It's simply ignored. It's quite incredible. It's like they're protected. It's like the Islamists are being protected. What they're doing is that they're being protected by the mainstream media. Whoever is controlling. There's something very, very strange going on here.
And of course, the West talked about they paid lip service to Israel's right to exist, but yet at the same time, all the funding went to Hamas because that was the government. Yeah. And the monster that is Hamas is basically an entity is being funded by the West, and it is again. I don't think we realize in the West. Most of don't realize that. I guess the proxy war, in effect, that the West have had against Israel using Hamas, because you fund Hamas, that's going to go towards attacks on Israel, and who knows the money from the West, how much of that went into planning and prepping for the attack on the 7th of October, we'll probably never know. And yet the West are complicit.
Well, most of it, I mean, you got to remember, every penny that goes to Gaza has gone to Gaza, and there's been, remember, per capita, the Gazans get something like order of magnitude per capita funding from the West than any other place in Africa or anything like that. And every penny, the West, of course, claims, oh, it goes to United Nations, UNRWA, or they can't even claim it goes to the Palestinian Authority, because they don't exist really in any way in Gaza. They say, well, it goes to United Nations. Well, we found out conclusively that UNRWA, that's the United Nations
refugee agency,
yeah, they are Hamas, and UNRWA is Hamas. So basically, every single penny of funding from the West into Gaza, multi-billions of pounds, dollars over the last few years, was sent to Hamas. And of course, you actually could see there was quite a lot of wealth in Gaza before October 7th. You can see beautiful palaces because Hamas members used that money for their own benefit. They had beautiful houses, far better houses than anyone in Israel, incidentally. It's another thing that people don't know. And you could see nice restaurants which were managed again by Hamas. You've got all that that veneer of actual quite sort of a nice kind of society. And yet most of the money was being funded in this incredibly elaborate military infrastructure of tunnels underneath, of which, incidentally, people don't realize only a fraction of those tunnels have been found and destroyed. Most of them are still intact, which is why, for example, even during this ceasefire, Hamas can just come out and shoot and kill Israeli soldiers. Well,
let's move on to someone else who is doing the PR battle for Israel, and that is one Mr. Tommy Robinson. And this will not play because it's 1 hour and 30 minutes. It's a Rebel Media clip, and Avi, who's doing fantastic work for Rebel and obviously accompanied Tommy on the trip. So Tommy Robinson was just banned from Al-Aqsa, even after being brought to the Temple Mount by a former member of the Knesset who was shot 4 times fighting for equal access to the holiest Jewish site. This is what real apartheid in the Middle East looks like. How have you seen? I mean, the Tommy trip. Tommy was invited by a member of the Israeli government. We'll touch on the outrage in a moment from the UK, but yeah, he's done some fantastic videos highlighting what's happening. How have you kind of seen that trip from afar?
Well, first of all, I know a lot of people who were with him. I know a lot of people who went to his. He's done a lot of phenomenal videos with individuals. He also did a very big talk to a very big crowd in Tel Aviv on the Saturday night after he got there. I know a lot of people who went to that, and I've seen that. It's quite incredible. He has done. In terms of Israel advocacy, you could say, he has done 100. His advocacy, I would say, has been 100 times. It's had 100 times more reach and effectiveness than all of the so-called establishment Jewish organizations, for example, in the UK, have over the last 2 years combined. Right, so but that's way out there. The quality of his journalism out there is quite incredible. He has brought to the public information that no other journalists have done. It's a really, really important information about just Israeli society from all the different perspectives. How the Christians are treated, all the other denominations. I mean, there was an interesting part of that clip that you mentioned there about his visit to the Temple Mount, is that they also with a Muslim, an Israeli Muslim, who who, when the guy, when the Waqf guy, whatever they are, who is supposed to be protecting the Al-Aqsa Mosque, who doesn't want to allow any Muslims in, he asked this guy, he was questioning this guy with them, and he clearly discovered that guy was a Muslim because he was able to recount, again, the Quranic verses. He said, well, you can come in, but nobody else can come in. And so, I mean, it just shows you, as he said, Tommy said, that's the real apartheid. It's in fact the only real apartheid that you'll find there in Israel. But it's the quality. Why haven't mainstream journalists been doing this type of quality journalism that Tommy's been doing? And I mean, he was there for almost 2 weeks, and he was working sort of from early hours in the morning till late at night, the whole time, doing interviews with a whole range of different people, covering a whole range of different topics in all the different areas. He went all over the country. Phenomenal reporting, revealing things that most people, even Jewish people, don't know about Israel. Quite incredible.
Yeah, because the critics will say this was a jolly for Tommy, but actually it was intense for the speaking engagements, all the interviews, going and training with some of the counterterrorism soldiers in the morning. You'd going into shops and talking to people there, talking to people on the street. There was so much, and you could see that Tommy was also affected by being there, by meeting the people. There is a special place. Israel is a special place, and to go there and to witness such history, and he realized it, he got it, and was impressed by it, and he was able to portray that to us, the public. So you're right, the journalism is so well done.
Yeah, and it also, of course, it actually strengthened his belief in Christianity as well, because he's kind of almost like a born again Christian now, and that's the whole his experiences there very much strengthened that. But of course, set against all this was the fact that there was actually a coordinated campaign by what I call the official Jews of the UK, which are basically all of the leftist Jewish journalists and all of the leftists Jewish organizations like the Board of Deputies and the so-called Jewish Leadership Council, just a self-appointed bunch of far left individuals who then claim to speak on behalf of the Jewish community when they don't actually at all. They don't represent anything like the majority of Jews in the UK, and they're certainly in no way representative of Jews elsewhere, as you can see by the very incredibly friendly welcome that Tommy got everywhere he went in Israel. But I found that it's so typical that there really was a coordinated campaign to try and discredit Tommy over this visit, because they were pushing the same old nonsense that, oh, this is bad for Israel because they were welcoming this racist thug, this convicted criminal, blah blah blah, and reeling out all the usual nonsense that they throw at Tommy wherever. I mean, I found that absolutely reprehensible, and I've been for the last 2 weeks on X, I've been putting out endless kind of like posts highlighting the stupidity of that coordinated campaign against him and how it's kind of backfired and just showed how irrelevant they are given the good that he's doing in comparison to anything they've ever done.
Well, you'd posted one of these individuals, Peter Prinsley MP. Obviously, he's an MP. I don't know who he is, but I want to play this clip and then bring up your post. So here is he in Parliament. He can't even use the name Tommy. Listen to it. He has to call him T. Robinson. Here's the clip from Parliament.
Mr. Yaxley Lennon, aka T. Robinson, has been feted in Israel at the invitation of a government minister, whilst the member for Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket, aka Dr. Peter Prinsley, has been banned. As a British Jew, a member of the Board of Deputies and a vocal supporter of the Israeli people in Parliament, what does the Secretary of State think can be usefully done to rectify this?
Minister.
My honourable friend is an incredibly thoughtful, long-standing commentator on these issues. Both him and his family have made a great commitment, a great contribution to UK-Israeli relations. It was an act of great foolishness to prevent him entering into Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. We called on the Israeli government at the time, as we did in the previous such instances. We cannot prevent the Israeli government from making decisions which are not in their interest, but this was clearly one of them.
Hold on. Let me bring up the post. It was interesting that the Israeli government are foolish, so they're calling them fools. Let me bring up your post, which was on that. That was the video clip. Here is the post. I think this is, there you go. Give us your thoughts. I see you put up that he was so supportive of Israel that he's not very vocal on Hamas. Maybe Tommy has been more supportive of Israel than this so-called supporter on the Board of Deputies. I mean, that just sums it all up.
Absolutely sums it up. This guy who claims to be a friend of Israel, he never ever has expressed any real words of support for Israel. Actually, if you check up his timeline and record, he's just been consistently critical of Israel, which is why, of course, the Israelis refused to allow him entry, along with the other anti-Israel MPs who simply wanted to go to the West Bank, i.e. Judea, Samaria, and cause trouble. That's what they were planning to do. So Israel had every right to stop him coming in. But you can see he's never once mentioned the word Hamas. He's quite active, as say, in criticizing Israel, but he's never criticized Hamas. And this is the type of person. And the fact that I didn't realize, I'd actually never heard of this guy before today. I had to look him up to find out what this guy was all about. Just a typical, he I think he was elected as, in the Labour wave in that area of the north of England in last year's election. Complete idiot. But the fact that he's on the Board of Deputies tells you everything about that ridiculous, irrelevant, but actually, when I say irrelevant, the trouble is they're not the government. The government, and this is the Conservative government did it before for many years. If they want to take advice, what they believe to be, or get the feelings of the Jewish community, it's the Board of Deputies they go to. It's basically, this is just the Labour. It's just the Jewish version of the Labour Party. That's all it is, and all it's ever been for many, many years. Right? These people. The fact that they've given them this credibility. I mean, they work with organisations like Hope Not Hate, who actually openly, I don't want to get into the whole thing about Hope Not Hate. You've done them before, but these are not friends of Israel in any real sense whatsoever, even though they claim to be.
No, 100%.
This guy.
Yeah, let's move you. On your feed, you gave me the very sad news, and we'll play the clip. The very sad news that Tucker Carlson thinks that despises me because I'll be a Christian Zionist. So that was the sad part of going through Norman's feed to find out that Tucker despises me and many others. Here's this short clip of him talking with Nick Fuentes.
How do you explain Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz? And there are a lot like that. John Bolton. I mean, I've known them all. George W. Bush, like Karl Rove. I mean, all people I know personally who I've seen be seized by this brain virus, and they're not Jewish. Most of them are self-described Christians, and then the Christian Zionists who are Christian Zionists. Like, what is that? Right. And I can just say for myself, I dislike them more than anybody. Because what? Because it's Christian heresy, and I'm offended by that as a Christian. That's why. So I don't why not? I'm pissed at the neocons, very pissed. I've said that a million times. I've been mad since December of 2003 when I went to Iraq. And so I went and asked straightforward questions to Ted Cruz, because that seemed like he was a sitting senator who's serving for Israel by his own description. He seemed like a worthy target. I'm not going after MTG. Who's the most sincere why not go after Ted Cruz? I don't understand.
This idea that actually saying that Israel has a 3,000-year history from when King David took Jerusalem as the capital 3,000, when you see as a Christian that everything I believe as a Christian is based on top of the promises that God gave through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to discount that Israel have a right to be in the land God promised them. That's my complete confusion of Tucker's position. But yeah, I am despised. So thanks for telling me that, Norman.
I think there was another. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I saw another part that into where he actually said that Christian Zionists are the most evil people on earth.
Oh, it could be.
I'm
Goodness,
not-
you're
I mean,
making me more depressed.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he said that those were
Could be.
his words. He described them as well. I don't know. Actually, I need to check that because I thought he did. But even what he said there, did he say something? He actually despised them.
Yeah, he despises more than anyone.
Oh, maybe that's what. Did he say that? Okay,
Yes.
so maybe that's what. Okay, so despise them more than anyone. Okay,
More than Hamas. We are the ones that are despised.
and he tried to use examples of a few well-known what he called neocons, right? But they're not people who you would call. I mean, yeah, he might call them. They probably are also Christian. They're Zionists who are Christian, but Christian Zionist encompasses, for example, all of the evangelicals, or most of the evangelicals. So he hates them. He despises them more than anybody else. And here he is, and he's been, of course, since he left Fox News, he has been funded. I mean, the organization he set up to do his podcasts, etc., was of course funded by a Muslim, and we know he's had trips to Qatar which were well funded, and we know that he claims to be America first, except it seems to be like Qatar somehow. He seems to respect Qatar more than America. He also claims that he doesn't believe that America should interfere in any other country, except he believes they should interfere and replace the government of Israel, which he was on the record as saying. So it seems to be he's just effectively now a Qatari mouthpiece. He's become a Qatari mouthpiece, whether he's getting direct funding from them or not. He's creating this schism within the MAGA movement as well. But there's the angle there, as you're saying, is that it seems to be this thing about this replacement theology aspect, which is essentially disassociating Israel from Christianity, and that's the thing which is it is particularly strange, and his rationale for now effectively coming up with statements like Christian Zionists are people he dislikes most in the world. It just, and I think this is incredibly damaging, right, to the Republican movement in America, because I mean, and it's been, people who don't know, the person he was interviewing there was this Nick Fuentes, who was an openly declared anti-Semite, proud anti-Semite, but it's just one of many. All of the people that Tucker's been interviewing very favorably have been people with a similar mentality, are viciously anti-Israel or anti-Semitic. The only one who he interviewed who wasn't, which was Ted Cruz, who he mentioned there, he actually really, really gave Ted Cruz a tough time. He asked tough questions, which he didn't ask of any of these. He didn't challenge any of these others in anything like that. They were really cozy. They've all been cozy chats, except for his interview with Ted Cruz. And so I'd like to think that people can see through this, but actually, unfortunately, Turning Point USA, and I see now the Heritage Foundation, have come out strongly in support of Tucker Carlson. And there also seems to be pumping this message, which, Tucker Carlson gave at the speech he gave for the memorial of Charlie Kirk. He made that what was clearly a very anti-Semitic statement, where he laughed at the end, where he talked about he could just imagine these hummus eaters sitting in their in Jerusalem planning to murder Jesus, right? And likening that, effectively making that analogy, almost suggesting that it was a similar group, conspiring to murder Charlie Kirk, and then he sort of laughed at the end of it. And he's pumped up also this complete lie that Charlie Kirk was murdered because he turned against Israel in the few weeks before, and that has been proven to be completely wrong as well. But it's this lie after lie they're using now to create this not just a separation between the Republican Party or any people in the conservative movement or evangelists and Israel, but to actually really try and destroy it. I can only think that he's now part of a movement with the Islamists to effectively try to almost destroy Israel.
Yeah, it's so I could talk about this for hours, but it's so strange because, and I think there has been, personally, I think there has been some fault with Jewish donors demanding that people support the Israeli government 100%. But then that is a fault. You can criticize the Israeli government and pure anger at them for the COVID tyranny, but that does not change history. That does not change God's promise to the Jewish people. That does not change that. I think in the Psalm it describes Israel as the apple of God's eye. And it says the promises are for generations and generations, and there is no end to that. And that is not dependent on the Jewish people. Just like in the New Testament, it's not dependent on our relationship with God, it's dependent on Him. So it's complete misunderstanding of who God is, the promises He makes. And you see the Old Testament time and time again, just as theology, time and time again, Israel walk away from God and God is always there to welcome them back. So just read your Bible and you'll understand.
I know, but this, as I say, this replacement theology. I mean, I don't mind naming names here. And it's someone who we both know, unfortunately, who's also been part of this suddenly. It was like a sudden thing just a few months ago. Our mutual friend Calvin Robinson has come out very strongly with this replacement theology, and as a result of that, has come out with some quite openly anti-Semitic statements, and a clear, he would say it isn't, but a clear, demonization of Israel as well. So it seems to be coming from all directions.
It is, and it's perplexing. No, it is a perplexing position. That you have to work very hard to come up with replacement theology from Scripture, very hard. Let's just end let's just do a few minutes on two other stories. We've got, let me see which one. Yeah, let me fire off. I don't know if we had discussed this before, but the grooming gang, I'd done an article on this in Gateway Pundit, and this is on the legal case. And I just want to highlight, I had the privilege of being on with Steve Bannon talking about it. There have been huge amount of shares on this, and it's a series I'm trying to do around this. But UK courts block grooming gang survivor from enforcing compensation award. 2.5 years ago, the judge awarded $425,000, over $500,000. 2.5 years later, actually nothing has happened. And when the judge gives an award, then the court have to allow you to enforce that. And 2.5 years later, the courts, and I'm told, the court's just taking their time. At 2.5 years seems to be a very long time, and the courts have been utterly silent for the last 13 months. Not a single response from the court. So this is where we are, and this is, I think, part of the cover-up we have of the grooming gangs, which are a stain on British history.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, of course, I've read this article, and it's the case, isn't it, that this guy, Ashgar Bostan, he's got a house which, under any normal circumstances where you've got an award like that, compensation award like that against you, the state are entitled to basically take that house and to sell that house and use the funds to pay the compensation that's been awarded. But they haven't attempted to do this. And you have to suspect that, again, if this had not, are they worried, for example, that there's going to be, again, mass protests to stop that happening? I suspect that's what they're worried about. There doesn't seem to be any motivation for enforcing the law again in this case, as there's been no motivation for enforcing the law against, all these, where you've got all this other Islamic kind of like gangs with roaming the streets with weapons and stuff like that. They, as we saw last week in Whitechapel, there was no motivation for the police to intervene to stop what was going on there, because I think they fear, there is a genuine fear of violence from these Muslim groups.
I think, and we've seen that in the grooming gang, that they are worried about the backlash, race rat to religious rats, and therefore these girls suffer and don't get justice. But you're right with this. I mean, it's not the courts that enforce the order; it's up to us as the party with the survivor who brought the case to now get permission. But in theory, we could be waiting for another 5 years until the courts decide. They have no, there's no requirement for them to do it in any space of time. If they came back in 20 years with a court date, that would be perfectly fine within the system. It is just the whole thing sucks. It
And that is,
really is
as
evil.
I say, from your article, they, every time, in order to get, a court appearance, there's sort of £10,000 worth of funding that has to be raised, and it's terrible.
10,000 is, and this is for a survivor that's already been through the system, been proved to have been raped. But then you have to say, please, can this individual have a fee exemption? Then you wait another 6 months, 9 months for them to say, yes, we'll allow you the fee exemption. Now you can put forward the papers. The whole thing is predicated on those in the legal system getting money. That's all it is. It's not about justice. So let's finish on this, which is the attack we saw it was West London. It was Uxbridge, wasn't it? Yes. So dog walker who was knifed to death in Uxbridge is named, as it's revealed, Afghan national arrested over triple stabbing, had arrived in the UK in a lorry in 2020 and been granted asylum. And it was Wayne Broadhurst, 49, who was murdered because the British state thought, actually, this person is a great candidate for being allowed to stay in this country. Who makes these decisions? But we see this time and time again, don't we? Mass immigration, people running around with machetes, with knives, and it's kind of become part of English culture now. It's crazy.
It's appalling. And incidentally, people need to bear in mind that he was granted asylum under a Conservative government.
Yes.
So, so people think that this is somehow a Labour thing. They're completely wrong here. In fact, all of the problems, all of the decisions that were made to effectively import this, I can only imagine this army of young men who I actually believe, there's a reason. The reason why I think this whole importation has been allowed, and the whole housing them all together in these migrant hotels. I think that I have to believe that they're preparing them to be some kind of part of some kind of, it might be a militia or even police force, in case there is some kind of major civil unrest. Because the obvious people you want to, I mean, the government have already said that they regard the far right as a real threat to the country. So if they think there's going to be civil unrest coming from the far right, the most obvious counter to that will be a militia formed of people exactly like this. Just as incidentally, if you look at the hotels, the migrant hotels, who is it? How comes they're so well protected from people, to stop people getting in? Who are the people, the security guards? They're former illegal migrants themselves in most cases. You can see, and they're defending their own people, as they see it, by stopping anybody else quite aggressively in many cases from coming in. So I see this as being, in the longer term, they want to use these people to defend against the horrible far right, etc. But this, I mean, I think there's been a few. This is horrific. This murder, completely unprovoked. I mean, life-threatening injuries to two others as well, including a guy who was just protecting his son from being stabbed. But there's been a number of other similar murders from people who should not have been in this country, who came. I mean, this guy came in a lorry. You'd have thought that would be enough reason not to grant him asylum. But it seems to me that it doesn't matter. We now know that all these people are coming across illegally in the dinghies. They're going to be granted asylum. None of them. They're not going to get rid of any of them, are they? And so we're going to continue to see these kinds of horrific attacks.
I think we will. Professor Norman, I always appreciate you coming on. Thank you for giving us your wisdom.
Yeah, thanks for letting me vent it all out. Yeah.
It's therapy. It's therapy.
Yeah.
Let me just play one clip of Tommy just to see us out. We'll not jump in, and it's him talking about being prayed for and wanting to be baptized. That 1 minute clip was, to me as a Christian, was I could feel the my neck tingling listening to that. But let me just play this 1 minute clip just to see us out. And I'll not start talking because I could do for the next hour. But here is the clip of Tommy.
Come to Israel. If not, even if you're on a bit of a journey to find history and find faith, when you come here and you see places that are spoke about in the Bible and you know stuff's happened here historically, thousands of years, it's a special place. It's a special place. I've had some amazing feelings. I actually think, the more I think about it, I had a moment where Christians prayed for me and I said, wow, I think I felt the Holy Spirit, which is mad, because I've had people talk to me about when the Holy Spirit come over them. As I had all those people with their hands on me, I just felt amazing. So I've had an unbelievable journey here. I wish I got baptised here. I really wish I do, in the Jordan River. And I'll probably come back and do that. So that's my only one regret, I think. There's not enough hours in the day. I haven't had any sun. I've ate too much food. I've put on a stone.
Wow, interesting end to his trip, and I'm sure we'll get many other videos of him discussing all different thoughts. But Professor Norman, thanks again for your time.
Thanks. Yeah.